What's good everybody, Chris here again, Chris Goes Outdoors, and today I'm going to talk about some of the gear that I used on the Appalachian Trail to both record and edit my videos that you hopefully watched on my YouTube channel of my Appalachian Trail thru hike. So I'm going to start off talking about the things that I had when I initially started the thru hike. Unfortunately, I no longer own any of them. I started my thru hike with this camera right here. I went ahead and printed out this wonderful little picture here, but you can check it out in my pre-Appalachian Trail electronics videos. I'll try to cut a couple of clips from that video in here anyway, but I started off with the Sony RX100 Mark III. It was a great camera, it did pretty well. It's fairly compact, fairly lightweight, and it filmed pretty good quality video. I used this camera in particular up until Shenandoah, where unfortunately in one of the most freak rainstorms I'd ever seen, the rain blew into my tent in just one little section and happened to exactly have been the location that this camera was placed. So unfortunately the screen was laying down on the tent and the water got in and made the actual screen on the camera not function anymore. Fortunately, it did have an electronic viewfinder you can pop up there, and the viewfinder mostly worked after the camera dried out. And I used this camera until around Franconia Ridge in New Hampshire. This camera did pretty well. It filmed 3/4 of my videos out there. The Mark III version that I used was pretty good. I paid $400 for it used, and that was last January, so January 2017. And the Mark IV and the Mark V are out. And the Mark V offers some pretty substantial upgrades over this model with their autofocus and 4K video capability, but I shot all my video for the most part at 1080p at 60 frames a second anyway, which this camera was capable of doing. The only real downside of this camera was that there is no external microphone jack, so you're stuck with the two mics, which are located right on top of the camera here, which can be problematic with wind noise, especially recording video up on a mountain. For the most part, I think people in general would do very, very well with the Sony RX100 series. If I were doing this for video, I would go with the Mark III, 4, or 5. I would look into picking them up used. This is a great, solid, nice, compact camera. So the batteries were really small too. You can get third-party ones, third-party chargers on the cheap for Amazon too. So it's definitely something worth checking out. Sony RX100. Again, I use the Mark III, but consider also checking out the Mark IV and the Mark V. If you watch my initial electronics video, you can see I also had a GoPro Hero 4 Silver and an external mic setup. I sent that home almost immediately. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't recommend a GoPro at all for vlogging. With the external mic setup I had, in all honesty, it wasn't too bad and it would pass, I suppose, but the fisheye effect does kind of get old really quick. A lot of the videos I did initially on this channel were done with a GoPro and that mic setup, and they're okay and whatever, but I feel like you can just get such better video from a standard like camera, something like the RX100 that doesn't have that super fisheye look to it. Even with the external mics, to me it's just not worth it. And if it's all you got, go for it, but didn't really work for me, didn't suffice for the quality that I kind of wanted to put out anyway. Even with the upgraded 5 and the 6 now, in order to even use an external mic, you need a pretty large adapter piece that connects to the GoPro, so to me it's not even worth it. And the actual audio that comes from GoPros without an additional microphone to me is absolute trash. Audio is important to video, it really is. I would argue just as important as video quality, so in my opinion, skip the GoPros altogether. Get something different. Use your cell phone if you gotta. So with the RX100, I did use two kind of tripod-ish adapters, and I'll show you right here. The first one was the stick pick. So what it does, there's a little screw mount on the bottom of cameras, and you can just screw this right on. So you screw the camera on, and you can tighten this to make sure that the camera's nice and secure. And this piece right here slips on and goes onto the end of your trekking pole, so you can kind of hold it out as a selfie stick. And I use this pretty often at the beginning of the trail. A lot of my videos, you can see it's kind of, the camera's a little further out. So I use this pretty often. It was nice because I didn't have to have anything like hanging out of my pocket when I would put my camera back. You could just pull it out, pop it on, record what you wanted, put it back in. This thing was just kind of always on my Sony RX100. And as I continued on the trail, I kind of wanted more of a traditional tripod so I could kind of set up my camera off to the side of the trail, get some different shots and stuff. And I switched to this right here, and this is, I believe it's a Joby Mini Gorilla Pod, so you can see just how tiny this guy is. And we'll talk about its big brother that I ended up getting in a minute, but just the size comparison here. I use this pretty extensively for the beginning of the trail as well. And the good thing about these GorillaPods is, say my arm is a tree limb, you can bend the legs of this tripod to really grip onto, say, a tree, a rock, or something, and that way it's nice and stable for when you're taking a video or a photo. So after the RX100 kinda died, the screen was dead, the viewfinder was a little wonky, the battery door also kind of popped off a little bit. So after all of that happened, I did end up upgrading my camera and my tripod as well. This is not initially the first one I had. I actually had this at home before I left, but I bought a very, very similar setup to this at the Walmart in Marion, Virginia. So it was just a knockoff version of this tripod that Walmart offered. And the Walmart one I had fell apart literally the day before I met with my girlfriend to pick this one up. Talk about timing. So it lasted from Virginia to the border of Massachusetts, I think it was. It did its thing for when I needed it. I think it was 20 bucks at Walmart, but I would recommend buying the legit Joby ones. These things, just like the little one, can wrap around big tree branches and stuff like that and hold on pretty good. And this one right here, also, you can adjust the little ball head here. It's got a level on there as well. The camera I ended up using had a built-in level. The Sony RX100 does too. You can level your shot really good with this too. And it's also got a quick clip on and off. So you can hit that there, pop that off, and just attach this to the bottom of your camera. So say you don't want to use this, you just want to carry the camera around. You can have this attached and you don't need to keep reattaching and attaching, and it just quickly snaps back in. I still to this day use this on all of my mountain videos. And then the camera that I ended up switching to. This right here is the Panasonic G7, and I have an attached microphone. We'll talk about that momentarily, but I'll pop that off quick just so you can see the actual camera. And it's a small little mirrorless camera. It comes with a 14 to 42 lens. I find these cameras pop up frequently on sale in the $500 range, and that's with the lens and the camera itself. And just look how small that is. It's nice and lightweight too, and it takes pretty good picture, and it takes incredible quality video for the weight and price of this camera. And the kit lens is surprisingly good on this camera. A lot of times on cameras, the kit lens that's included, it's just not very good quality. And I'm not saying this one's superb, I'm not saying it's excellent, but it will suffice, I think, for most people. This one also has a fully articulating screen. The Sony RX100, the screen actually flipped up from the back. Either way, both of them had an articulating screen. Both have a viewfinder. The main thing that I liked about this camera can shoot 4K. So it can shoot 4K at 30 frames a second, also 24 frames a second. It also has an additional jack for a mic input, which is huge. It has a native time-lapse app. The Sony, oddly enough, does not come with a time-lapse app. You have to pay additional for the Sony one or download a third-party one, which just seems really foolish. The downside of this camera is that there is not image stabilization. The Sony did have some image stabilization, so you need to be pretty good with holding your camera pretty steady, and I didn't have much of an issue with that, especially when using the Joby GorillaPod. But this camera is it's a little workhorse, and it's a great camera for the price. I have since upgraded from this camera after the trail for its bigger brother, the Panasonic G85. It's literally just the upgraded version of this, roughly the same size, but it does offer image stabilization. So I personally really like the Panasonic and the Micro Four Thirds systems. However, there is a massive downside to these cameras, the Panasonic cameras in general. And that, of course, is if you rely on autofocus and autofocus only, you are going to have a terrible time with these cameras. The autofocus on Panasonics are well known to be substandard, to say the least. And I'm talking in video. Sony and Canon are, in my opinion, light years ahead of Panasonic in the autofocus systems. If you leave it on continuous autofocus and you're trying to film yourself, you'll see it hunt all the time trying to see what's in focus, and it looks terrible. So what I would do is set it to manual focus on the back here, and then when you hold it out, if you just tap the little button there, the little shutter button, up on the corner here an autofocus button will appear. So I would hit the autofocus and I would see it focus on myself, and that way I knew that I was in focus. So I ended up using this camera nearly completely manual focus. If I were doing shots in the distance, I would do an autofocus and then manually adjust the focus just to make sure that it was all set. For some, it could be a huge downside. In all honesty though, I'm so glad that I did it because I feel like it completely changed the way that I recorded videos. And I mean that in a good way. I'm much more hands-on with it now. I know a lot of people like, I don't want to worry about that. Like, I need autofocus. I would try to get used to doing things manually. I feel like these cameras, the G7 and the G85 I'm filming this on, just changed the way I filmed everything. And if you look at my most recent hiking videos, and even from New Hampshire up to the end at Katahdin, I feel like the videos have like a completely different vibe. For the quality video and photo that you can get from this in the nice compact size, and with the additional audio jack for the microphone we'll talk about here, I would definitely use this camera again. If you can, and if you have the money, I would recommend, especially for trail vlogging, to upgrade to the Panasonic G85 because that extra in-camera stabilization is worth it to me. The in-camera stabilization is very, very noticeable in video. Worth investing into the big brother, but if you can only afford this one too, I think you'll be all set. This is a great little camera. As far as audio goes, I ended up picking up this guy right here, and this is a Rode Video Micro with windscreen. You buy this package, it all comes in one. A lot of times the windscreens are sold separate from the microphones, but this package came all in one, and it was about $40, maybe $50, I think. So the microphone itself is actually fairly small. It just plugs in with this little adapter right here. This is the mic here. This thing's been through the ringer. I can't tell you how many trees I did run into with this thing. You might be able to see it's got some chips and stuff on it. And I somehow never broke the cable. I never broke the microphone. The shock mount is plastic, but is still completely functional. And the windscreen I just attached a hair tie to, just in the event it ever fell off, it would just fall and hang. The windscreen just pops on right there, and it does help immensely with blocking out wind noise. Some people might see this and think that's absolutely ridiculous. Why would you ever use something this big? And to me, the quality of video and the audio that you get from this is just unreal for the size that you are taking with you. Again, once I was carrying it around, I really didn't think that it was too bad. So it was just the best overall package, and it was at a cheap enough price where if something did happen to this, I wasn't overly concerned about it. When it rained, I typically didn't use it as much. I would still keep it a lot of times on the outside of my bag, but I would wrap a big gallon Ziploc bag over it, seal it up, and then wrap a plastic bag over that. And sometimes I would, even in the rain, take it out, take a quick video. Another big plus for the G85 that I'm actually filming on now, the upgraded version. The G85 is what they refer to as weather sealed, which means it's more water resistant. So that's another big plus for it too if you're taking it out on the trail. Anyway, I hope the video was helpful. I hope that you got some sort of information out of my rambling. If you did, enjoy. Consider dropping the video a like. If you love the video, consider commenting and subscribing. You can follow me on Instagram if you care to, at Chris Goes Outdoors. And until next time, take care everyone. We'll see you out on the trail.